Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for Y'shtola Knights Blessed. Y'shtola is a 4-mana 2/4 cat warlock with vigilance. At the beginning of each end step, if a player loses 4 or more life this turn, we draw a card, and then whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Y'shtola deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. So this is some Y'shtola draining enchantments. So why play Y'shtola? Before I start that off, I just want to mention, right? This deck is not out yet, right? This commander, the face commanders have been spoiled, so before I go any further, I have no knowledge about any of the cards that are going to be in this commander precon. There's going to be some no-brainers that are in this precon. I'm almost positive that aren't going to be in this list. This was just a video because I saw the commander and I thought she's super cool and I wanted to make a deck, right? So why player, right? Each opponent and each end step is super, super big, right? So whenever we cast a non-creature spell, right, with mana value 3 or greater, ideally, that's the whole point of our deck, is casting things 3 or greater. Each opponent is losing 2 life, and we are gaining 2 life. So functionally, for casting a spell that progresses our board anyway, we're working with 8 points of life. Each of our opponents, assuming we're in a pot of 4, we have 3 opponents, each take 2 damage, that's 6. We gain 2, that's 8. So every time we cast a spell, we're working with 8 points of life, right? So each end step is also a really big deal because it doesn't need to be us, right? So we don't have to make someone lose more than 4 life. If someone just attacks someone with a 5/5, cool, we'll draw a card. If someone wants to attack us with a 5/5, okay, we'll still draw a card and we have the life gain to offset it. Mana value 3 or greater is really most things anyway. At least more of like the bigger, more impactful things. You can make arguments for certain things, but I feel like the majority of Magic cards really start to kick up once they get to 3 or more. Passive life gain also lets us go shields down a little bit. Like I said earlier, if someone wants to swing at us for 5 damage, that's kind of okay because that's basically like 2.5 spells that we just need to offset it, which isn't that bad. And also, she is a super versatile build. Like, so when I first saw her, my first thought was to make Esper artifacts. But then I thought, you know, everyone's going to make Esper artifacts because, like, she's just really good for it. Or you could go just like Spellslinger. I decided to go on Enchantments just because, I don't know, I like Enchantments and I thought it'd be a fun build. So here's the game plan. We don't need her to win. Like, she's a good engine that draws us cards and drains our opponents. But like we're still enchantments, like we can still win without that kind of effect. So the idea is early game we want to get anything we can that's like 3 or less CMC. I'm talking rocks, utility pieces, maybe some creatures because we're not going to get any benefit from these creatures. Mid game, say turn 4-5, I want to whip out Y'shtola, right? Start draining our opponents, start getting that value engine set up. And then late games, we want to make ourselves untouchable through enchantment prison effects so we can kind of play at our own pace, drain all of our opponents with her, and then hopefully we can get a little army of tokens and we can beat down with her. So channel and deck stuff, at the time of the filming, this deck is like 445. Take it with a grain of salt. Like, again, like all the time, the lands can be changed, right? Y'shtola's pre-selling for like $30. Man, the precon's gonna cost like $50. Like, there's no way this one card is going to be, you know, that expensive when every single one comes with it. It's also a bracket 4, if that matters at all, because, I don't know, it has a couple good cards in it. Get the cards you do need from the link down below. And if you like the video, I guess give it a like, give me a nice comment. I try to respond to all comments and subscribe to the channel. So, no planeswalkers, no battles, sorry to say. Going into creatures, just Arcana Sun's Grace is super good because ultimately Constellation, whenever an enchantment you control enters, make a 2/2 white Pegasus creature token with flying. Also, Pegasus creatures you control have flying, so whenever we have an enchantment enters, we're making basically a 2/2 flying lifelink, and he's a 3/4 flying lifelink body himself. Delny is super good. The top ability's good, but we don't really care. We care more, like we're running for the bottom ability. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Y'shtola is a 2/4. So that means whenever we cast like a non-creature 3 or greater, right? I'm just going to say spell for that just because most of our cards are non-creature spells with mana value 3 or greater. So I'm going to say whenever we cast a spell for now on, right? And if obviously it's a non-creature or if it's 2 or less, you guys get the picture, right? So basically, for all intents and purposes, whenever we cast a spell, Y'shtola is going to drain everyone for now 4 damage, and we are going to gain 4 life, which is also going to proc her, because every single time we cast any spell, since each opponent's losing 4, we're going to be drawing 1 card every turn. Therefore, if we cast any instant on our opponent's turn, we're drawing like a card at the end of it to replace it. Enduring Tenacity is super good. Again, and you can also read, I guess he's a bad example because he is a creature, but if you see any of the non-creature spells that have CMC 3 or greater, just assume that the benefit is stapled on of, yep, this spell also is going to drain each of our opponents and we're going to gain some life. But anyways, Enduring Tenacity is good regardless. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life, and then when it dies, it comes back, but it's not a creature. So the idea is, we have Y'shtola, cast a spell, each opponent loses 2, we gain 2 life. Since we gain 2 life, we just have one other person lose an extra 2 life, bringing it to 4 damage or 4 loss of life, and now we're drawing cards. Entity Tracker, Flash, which is really good for an Enchantress. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, draw a card. I'll tell you guys, we have 1 room. Try to guess what that room is before we get there. But we have 1 room, so it's not really relevant. Any of the eerie things is just whenever an enchantment enters. So basically, Entity Trackers, we're drawing cards, which is super great. Gremlin Tamer is super good, just because whenever we get an enchantment going on, we also get a little 1/1. Again, we're really not creature heavy in the deck, so these little 1/1 chump blockers are really, really good. Inquisitive Glimmer is just a good cost reducer, right? Enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less. If we want to unlock the 1 room and have it cost 1 less, sure, we'll take it. Why not? Mesa Enchantress is super good. Whenever we cast an enchantment, draw a card. Short, sweet, to the point Enchantress, and we cast a lot of enchantments. Master of Keys, I do like the idea of, we don't have a ton of recursion in the deck, right? We have a little bit, but we don't have a ton. So the idea is, if like Mesa Enchantress or like, I don't know, Zerd dies or whatever, we can escape them from or we can exile them from our grave, just so we can pay the cost of some other escape enchantment we want to get back out there. It's just a way for us to have like kind of good amount of recursion. Zur the Enchanter is really great. So when we attack with him, we're searching our deck for an enchantment card with CMC 3 or less and put it straight onto the battlefield. We're not going to get the cast trigger, but honestly, just a hard tutor is really good. I think we have like 14 or 16 cards like that we can just tutor. So really, really good. Dance of the Manse. I know we said we don't have a lot of recursion. We can go nuts. I like to think of Dance of the Manse of more of a realistic, let's say X is 3, because I think that's fair. So really 5 mana to return the 3 best enchantments from our grave to the field. Super, super good. And then if we want to go nuts and we have a ton of mana and we want to just dump 8 mana into this, we can just make all of our thing 4/4s, which is still fine. It's a good way to beat down. I don't know. Idyllic Tutor. Search our deck for enchantment. Reveal it. Put it on our hand. We're an enchantment deck. Sounds good to me. Supreme Verdict is great because it can't be countered. It nukes all creatures. So since we don't have a ton of creatures and we work more with, you know, I guess just enchantments, it's a good little way to put a big pause on the game and say, oh guys, let's not go crazy for like 1 or 2 turns, right? Like, we're going to clear the board and we'll start up, and hopefully we don't take too much of a backcrack from it. And then finally, we have Toxic Deluge. As additional cost, pay X life. All creatures get -X, -X. The idea is, Y'shtola is a 2/4, so even if we pay 3 life and give each creature -3, -3, Y'shtola will live, and that it's going to kill most creatures. And then if it's not going to kill most creatures, we can just pay however much life we need, because we have so much life offset just from casting spells. It's really good. Going into instants. Now, instants are important because Y'shtola has the card draw ability is at the beginning of each end step. So we have to make sure that our opponents are losing, hopefully, 4 more life on the end steps, right? So we've got to have a good amount of enchantments. Anguish Unmaking, exile target non-land permanent, you lose 3 life. Again, so when I say think of the spells, right? So ideally with Y'shtola, this kind of spell says exile target non-land permanent. Each opponent loses 2 life, and we lose 1 life, functionally. Pretty good. Counterspell is Counterspell. I mean, it's too good. It doesn't cost 3. It is what it is. It's just too good to not have. Like, Counterspell is just, it just counters a spell for 2. It's so good. Cyclonic Rift is the best card of Magic according to the bracket system. Ideally, we're not doing the 2 mana ability. Ideally, we're doing the 6 mana ability and just kind of having a one-sided board wipe that also procs off a drain. Deadly Rollick, I like the idea, and I think it's like a cute idea, right? If you control a commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost, exile target creature. And since the idea is we always have Y'shtola, right, because that's our commander, it is functionally a free spell, 0 mana, exile target creature, and each opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. Now that's a good spell. Dismember, I like the idea of only paying 1 and then losing 4 life, and then when we cast it, since it costs 3 or greater, we're really only losing 2 life to kill off a creature. So basically, 1 mana, target creature gets -5/-5, everybody takes 2 damage. Sounds good. Dovin's Veto is also pretty sweet. I know it doesn't cost more than 3, but kind of same deal with Counterspell. It's just too good to not have. And also, I do want to say with Dismember is a great way to make sure that we lose 4 life during whenever we need to, so we can draw a card, so it always replaces itself. Fell the Profane is just a land on the other side, but it's also a 3 or greater non-creature spell on the top side. So, destroy target creature or planeswalker, it's good removal when we need it, it's a land when we don't. Fierce Guardianship, the same idea of Deadly Rollick. If you control a commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. So functionally, a free negate. I like the idea of it. And again, we're doing the draining. Frantic Search is not a free spell, but it also is. So it's not a free spell, but like realistically, it's a free spell. Draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, untap up to 3 lands. Each opponent loses 2 life. We gain 2 life. Actually, each opponent takes 2 damage. So that's important. But either way, the idea is we tap 3 mana for it, we untap 3 lands. It's basically a free spell. We filter out our hand. It's super good. Generous Gift. Get rid of something they don't like. They can also lose 2 life while they're at it, and so can all your opponents. You know, just good removal. Get rid of a land if we need it. Rewind. Also a free spell. Counter target spell. Untap up to 4 lands. Works out. I don't know. Not really, but it works out. Sink into Stupor. Return target spell or non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. It's a remand, it's a bounce spell, it's a land, it costs 3 mana, and that's going to gain us some life and hurt our opponents. Stroke of Midnight, kind of a worse Generous Gift, but still fine. They pop a non-land, they get a 1/1. I don't know, what's more important? Your opponent having a 3/3 for a permanent, or them having a 1/1 for a non-land? Teferi's Protection is really just in this deck, assuming someone tries to really hurt us. I'm talking like, we're an enchantment deck, right? I'm talking someone farewells enchantments, or someone austere commands all enchantments and just tries to wipe our board. We kind of get, and if we have no counters, we kind of get like, hold up, wait a minute, not happening, we're out of here. So it's like a one little protection, or if someone tries to wipe, just destroy all creatures, we can kind of protect ourselves. And also, each opponent loses 2 life, and we gain 2 life because it's a cast trigger. Unwind, guys, yet another kind of free spell. Counter target non-creature spell, untap up to 3 lands, it costs 3, tap 3 lands, you just untap them right away, and we drain our opponents. And then the final one is Void Rend, can't be countered, destroy target non-land permanent. I think it's good. Maybe not the best because the colors are awkward, but I like it. It's Esper, it's fun. Going into artifacts, we have Arcane Signet, really just because it's a rock. We don't have a ton of ramp options in Esper aside from artifacts. We have Bide Nefasa. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, which is nice because we can make a decent amount of tokens. And we can also force creatures your opponents control to attack this turn if able, which is also really nice to help enable life loss to make sure that people are losing more than 4 life a turn, so we're drawing an extra card every turn. Cloud Key enters. We say enchantment. Enchantments cost 1 less. Sounds good to me. Decanter of Endless Water, I feel like we're going to be drawing a lot of cards in this deck, right? Just because ideally we're drawing we're drawing 2 cards on our turn, and then we're drawing 1 card on each opponent's turn. So everything ideally replaces itself in our favor. It's a mana rock, and we have no max hand size. Soul Ring is Soul Ring. It's good. It's Soul Ring. And then we have all of 3 of the talismans of whatever, just so we can have the untapped colorless mana if we need it, or really just the untapped colored mana at the cost of a life. Again, we gain a good amount of life, so it doesn't really matter tremendously about the life loss. Either way, they're untapped. Dual sources for 2. Going into enchantments, the reason we're here. Order of Silence is an absolute stinker. Artifacts and enchantment spells cost target opponent an additional 2 to play. This is an old weird ruling. Ultimately, how it says is artifacts and enchantments cost 2 more to cast for your opponents. Like, your opponents have to spend 2 more for your artifacts and their artifact and enchantment spells. So don't worry about the target. Artifacts and enchantments cost 2 more for your opponents. And then if someone tries to get rid of it, we sacrifice it to pop an artifact or enchantment. Again, and since all of these are ideally 3 or more, we're doing the drain. Black Market Connections, I think, is super good. Pick probably all of them, if I would say all of them, because ideally we're losing like that 6 life, so then we're always drawing an extra card no matter what. So we're making a treasure, we're drawing a card, and we're making a 3/2 blocker, which is pretty good. Copy enchantment. We have a lot of good enchantments in this deck, so why shouldn't we have another copy of it? Curiosity is super good. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card, which is really important because Y'shtola says she deals 2 damage to each opponent and we gain 2 life. So that counts as damage. So whenever we cast a spell with CM3/3 or greater, we're drawing a card. Esper's Invocation enters the battlefield as a copy of any enchantment, except basically at the beginning of our upkeep, we may blink it. We have a lot of good enchantments, so why shouldn't we have an extra copy of it? Extravagant Replication is at the beginning of your upkeep. Create a token that's a copy of another target non-land permanent you control. And again, guys, we have a lot of good enchantments in this deck, so why shouldn't we have another copy of it? Or we can also just start cloning up creatures, like Archons of Sungrace would be good. These 2 enchantments I wanted to pull off to the side just to talk about it is an infinite combo, right? So are we running it for an infinite combo or just for the cards? And the answer is yes, both, right? They're both good naturally in the deck, and they just happen to go infinite. Same thing with Enduring Tenacity. Enduring Tenacity is a Sanguine Bond. Exquisite Blood. Whenever an opponent loses life, we gain that much life. So imagine we cast a spell with Y'shtola. Each opponent loses 2 life. That is now 6 life. So they lose 2, and we gain 6, plus the 2 we gain naturally. So they lose 2, we gain 8. Sanguine Bond is whenever we gain life, target opponent loses that much. We cast a spell. Target opponent, or each opponent takes 2 damage. We gain 2 life. We gain 2 life. Target opponent loses 2 life. It's pretty good. And then just the way the infinite works in this deck is it's just a loop, right? It's an instant game over loop. Well, I guess not instant, but you guys get it. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. Whenever you gain that much life, target opponent loses that much life. So either someone gains life, we gain life or an opponent loses life. It starts the loop. Let's say we whack our opponent for 1 damage, right? An opponent loses life, Exquisite Blood trigger, we gain 1 life, Sanguine Bond trigger, someone loses 1 life, Exquisite Blood, since they lost life, we gain it, since we gain it, they lost it, and we cycle through everyone and kill them. We have Ghostly Prison to make creatures can't attack us for, basically have to pay 2 mana to attack us per creature. We don't have a ton of creatures in the deck, and we just want to make sure that we're not being smacked all the time. We want to be smacked a little bit, because we want to make sure we're drawing cards during our opponent's turn. But we don't want to have, like, an army of tokens attack us. Now, Glistening Oil is something. Enchanted creature has Infect. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 counter on it. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the bottom ability. All that matters is enchanted creature has Infect. And it's not going to, like, our opponents aren't going to live long enough for this to happen. Anyway, the bottom 2 abilities. So Infect, as you know, this creature will now deal damage in the form of poison counters. So now, whenever we cast a spell, each opponent is going to not take any damage, but they are each going to get 2 poison counters, and we are going to gain 2 life. So now we just have to cast 5 spells to make each opponent lose the game simultaneously, which sounds pretty good to me, because Infect is crazy. Grasp of Fate enters the battlefield. For each opponent, exile up to 1 target non-land that player controls until Grasp of Fate leaves. You just get rid of the best thing each opponent controls, and hopefully they don't get rid of it. We have Greed. I like the idea of it, just because we can draw cards pretty much whenever. We can pay 2 mana to lose 4 life to draw a card, or draw 2 cards. If we want to draw essentially a 3rd one, it's good. We gain a lot of life. If we're just bored and we have nothing else to do, we'd have black mana floating because we're holding up instant mana and no one did anything. It doesn't hurt to do. Hallowed Haunting, as long as you control 7 or more enchantments, creatures you control have flying and vigilance. And then, whenever you cast an enchantment, you create basically a spirit cleric equal to the number of other spirits you control. So the idea is we have this on the field, we cast an enchantment, we make 1, 1, 1. And then we cast another enchantment, we now have 2 2/2s and 3 3/3s and 4 4/4s, and then eventually 10 10/10s. With ideally flying and vigilance. Helm of the Gas Lord was definitely made for Y'shtola. Enchant creature, right? As long as enchanted creature is blue, it gets +1/+1, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to an opponent, draw a card. As long as enchanted creature, sorry, not combat damage, deals damage to an opponent, draw a card. As long as enchanted creature is black, it gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, that player discards a card. So ultimately, this says Y'shtola, instead of being a 2/4, is now a 4/6, and whenever we cast a non-creature spell, right, with mana value 3 or greater, each opponent takes 2 damage and discards a card, and we gain 2 life and draw a card for every spell we cast. So pretty good. Imprisoned in the Moon is just a good removal. Ideally for commanders, you just make it a land, a colorless land with no types. It's annoying to get rid of. Mirror Maid is, we have a lot of good enchantments in this deck, so why shouldn't we have another copy of it? Artifacts doesn't really matter too much. Oblivion Ring is just a slightly, I don't know, a different but slightly worse Grasp of Fate that only has 1 target. Either way, it's really good. It's good either way. Phyresis, enchanted creature as Infect. That's the whole thing. Cast 5 spells, game's over. Phyrexian Arena let us draw an extra card on our upkeep. We lose a life, but who cares because we gain so much. Propaganda, same thing as Ghostly Prison. We just don't want people swinging out with a bunch of like creatures that we can't really deal with because we only have so many creatures in the deck. But either way, right, we don't want them to attack it, and we can make copies of it. Rhystic Study is the best card in the game. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1 mana. It just taxes our opponent or we draw cards. And if you have one of these in your deck, it turns your Chimera Tribal deck into top tier. I hate the bracket system, guys. It doesn't make any sense. Shark Typhoon. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, make an XX blue shark with flying, where X is that spell's CMC. Ideally, they are all 3/3, at least 3/3 flyers. We can cycle it in a pinch to make a dude, but ideally we're not doing that. Sigil of the Empty Throne, whenever we cast an enchantment spell, make a 4/4. Well, we cast a lot of enchantments, so hopefully we're making a lot of 4/4s. Smothering Tithe is also the best card in all of Magic. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2 mana. If that player doesn't, we make a treasure. So it's either we tax them on their draws or we make treasure out of it. So it's a win-win either way. And I know I keep saying, oh, it's the best card in all of Magic. I'm just critiquing the bracket system and the quote-unquote game changers. It's a mess. Sphere Safety is one of my favorite enchantments of all time. And this is like, when I have like all of the Mirror Maid and the copy enchantments, I feel like copy and Sphere Safety is really good. Creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. So in my head, right, if we have 5 enchantments, right, and that's not even a good amount of enchantments in this deck. Let's say we have 5, but that's like a bad one. 5 enchantments. Creatures have to pay 5 mana to attack us per creature, and then we can make copies of it. And now, great, each creature has to pay 10 mana to attack us. And honestly, that means they're not attacking us. Trouble in Pairs, another one of the best cards in all of Magic. If an opponent would begin an extra turn, they skip it. If an opponent would attack you with 2 or more creatures, draws their second spell, or draws their second card, or casts their second spell, we draw a card. So ideally, again, we're just staying on top of card draw. And then the enchantment room, if you guessed it earlier, is Restricted Office and Lecture Hall. It's for Restricted Office. When you unlock this door, destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater, right? And then other permanents you control have hexproof. So the idea is Restricted Office, and then copying it with like Extravagant Replication. Either way, it's a board wipe that doesn't hit Y'shtola or most of our other guys. That also we get the drain ability from, and we can make copies of it, and then we have to pay 4 mana to unlock that room, because that's just how it works, because that's a cast ability, not an enters ability, and it enters as a copy of it. But you guys, you get it. It's really good. And then late game, if we just want to level it up and hit one of those like few eerie triggers, we can make other permanents have hexproof, which really isn't even that bad. Going into lands, it's really nothing too crazy. I'm running all of the Vow lands, all of the check lands, all of the shock lands, and all of the Battle Bond lands. They're just good dual cycles. I like the idea that most of them are untapped most of the time. But going into lands that aren't a part of a cycle, Arcane Sanctum because it taps for any color. Pachuca Bog is just a really good swamp that enters tapped. It's just to get rid of a pesky Reanimator's grave. Command Tower because it taps for any color. Exotic Orchard ideally because it taps for any color, because I feel like the likelihood of our opponents are playing, at least one of our 3 opponents are playing a combination of white, blue, black, makes this almost always an untapped duel. Hall of Heliod's Generosity, a little bit of reanimation. The way I like it is before we draw on our turn, on our upkeep, we just put an enchantment card from our grave on top of our deck, and then we just draw that for turn. Really good either way. Rafine's Tower, plains, island, swamps, taps for any color, enters tapped. We can cycle it if we don't like it. It's fetchable. It works for check lands. It's good. And then the final non-basic land we have is Reliquary Tower, just to give us no maximum hand size, because ideally we're drawing a lot of cards and we do not want to discard them. Going into basics, we have 6, 6, and 4, really just because we're a bit more island and plains heavy, and I got rid of 1 swamp because we have Bajuka Bog, and it just kind of all works out. I think that's like 30, 35 lands and 37 with MDFCs with Fel the Profane and Stink in the Stupor. Either way, that's fine. We draw so many cards, it doesn't really matter. Like, our ramp is staying consistent with our land drops. That's all I got for you guys. Thanks for watching. Get the cards you need from the link right down below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.